In 5 minutes at Next Stage, we'll be talking about disrupting cancer care for the whole planet. Come and join us.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I am super excited to be here today, and frankly, I'm humbled to be joined by such incredible guests here today for our panel. So we're going to talk about cancer, and we're going to talk about how this affects people who have been diagnosed with cancer and how to help them live better lives. And I've got, as I mentioned, some very distinguished panelists that have devoted their lives to make sure that people have full lives despite a diagnosis with cancer. So I'll start out with an introduction about who I am. So my name is Kyle Holen. I'm a medical oncologist, and I treated patients for about 7 years at a cancer center. After treating people who were diagnosed with cancer, I moved to the industry where I worked to try and find better therapies for people who live with cancer. And I've done that now for about 17 years. Most recently, I've been working on new therapies for people with cancer at a company called Moderna. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at Moderna to help people who have been diagnosed with cancer. But before I go into what we're doing at Moderna, I just would like my guests to say a little bit about themselves and talk to us about why an individualized approach for cancer therapy and people who are diagnosed with cancer is so important. And I will start to my left here with Kris. Kris, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. South by is such an incredible place with so much energy and creativity and passion, and we're privileged to be a part of it. So I'm Kris Carr. I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I'm a wellness coach, and I am a cancer thriver. So I've been living with stage 4 cancer for 21 years now. And it's really this experience that inspired my work. So when I was newly diagnosed on Valentine's Day in 2003, there was very little known about my very rare disease. So the first doctor that I spoke to suggested a triple organ transplant. And I didn't know much about medicine back then, but I thought that was nuts. You know?
It was nuts.
It was a little nuts.
Yeah, it was nuts.
And the next doctor gave me 10 years to live, and that was, again, 21 years ago. And the doctor after that suggested really radical treatments that wouldn't do anything or wouldn't cure me necessarily, but we didn't even have a baseline to determine whether or not I needed those radical treatments. And it was really that experience that inspired me to become my own patient advocate and navigator. And I named myself the CEO of my health and decided that I was going to hire, fire, build my team, and find my second in command because the doctors work for me. I'm a nice boss, though. And I was lucky to find my doctor at Dana-Farber, and what was so wonderful with my doctor, who I'm still with, Dr. George Dimitri, is he opened my eyes to a whole other approach, partly because he said, because there's so little known about your disease, it can be slow growing, it can become aggressive, it can change at any time. We're going to watch and wait and track you and let cancer make the first move. And while we're doing that, you're going to go and watch and live. And that was the inciting incident because I didn't know how to. So I decided to devote my career and my practice to learning how to take care of myself and teaching patients how to do the same. And why I think an individualized approach is so important is really because of my own experience, but because we're not statistics. We're whole people with whole lives and a whole lot of potential, and we need a holistic individual care plan. And I'll just wrap by saying that I just had my 21-year scan, and I said to Dr. D, I said, so first of all, do we have to do succession planning? Are you good? Because now I get scanned every 5 years. And he said, no, I'm so passionate about my work. And I said, so why do you think I'm still stable? Like, what's the secret? And he said, if I knew that, I'd have my Nobel. This is why we have to study patients like you. This is why we have to do the type of work that Kyle is doing.
And Kris, can I just ask you a little bit about that first meeting when he said you need to learn to live with cancer and watch? It must have been incredibly scary. What was your first emotion?
Yeah, it was very scary because back then I didn't really know many cancer patients, and I thought you got treatment, and if you were lucky, you went into remission and you got your life back, and that wasn't a possibility for me. And I had to learn how to live with the knowledge of the disease while waiting and dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety. And I left the doctor, I left his office that day, and my husband and I, we went to Whole Foods because I thought, well, vegetables are good. I guess I should start there. I literally was crying in the produce aisle, and I wasn't sure if I was crying about the kale or the cancer, but eventually I figured it out.
It's like flying blind. It's not quite fair.
Yeah.
Well, we need to dig into that a little bit more, which I know we will. But before we do so, let's move on to Brad. Brad, you run an organization that's doing incredible things. Talk to us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and why, for you, an individualized approach is important.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you guys are saying. It's a tremendous honor to be up here with you and in this place. My path to get here probably started when I was 9 years old, and I'll try and make it quick. At 9, it was the first time I ever got into a whitewater kayak, and that quickly turned from a hobby to a passion to a profession. And at the crossroads of deciding to go to college or pursue my career as an athlete, I bought a one-way ticket around the world to go kayaking, and the rest is history. I haven't made back to college yet. My dad's not too stoked on that. But somewhere along the way, my aunt was diagnosed with cancer as a young adult, in her 30s, a story we hear so often. She just started a new marriage, a new job. She was wanting to start a family, and all of that got derailed when she was diagnosed. And to answer your question, Kyle, for me, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but that was the first time cancer really came into our life in a personal way. And prior to that, I guess I just thought of cancer as like just one thing, right? It was just one cancer. And of course, you can speak to the biologies of cancer and the differences and the different types of cancer. But what we've seen in working for the past 2.5 decades with young adults with cancer, 18 to 39 years old, is that, and I think we can all relate to this, right? That's an incredibly transformational time in all of our lives. You're not the same person at 18 as you are at 39. You're leaving the house, starting college, starting careers, dating, starting families, being married, and all of that happens in a way that's very complicated and challenging. So if you pile on cancer in that, things get really complicated. And each individual is at such a different place in their life that we see at our programs, and most of them have their own cancer that they're dealing with and in their own stage of it. And so what we've learned is you have to take an incredibly individualized approach. You have to meet each person where they are to help them define their own success in that process.
Great. I'm very curious to hear more about that specific population that you serve and why you think you can make such a big impact. Before we do so, though, I would like to talk a little bit about that individualized approach that both of you have mentioned and what we're doing at Moderna to try and meet the needs of people with cancer. We're developing, and I have to say, before I go on, that I have to thank President Biden for the shout out at the State of the Union address. I'm not sure how many of you heard, but he mentioned how we're taking the COVID vaccine technology and we're applying it to develop some cancer vaccines. So this is a slide that talks a little bit about how we're developing a cancer vaccine. As Brad mentioned, and Kris vividly illustrates, every cancer is unique. And so it's not just I have lung cancer, but my cancer has a very unique series of mutations. Well, we're exploiting these mutations by taking a piece of someone's cancer. We're sequencing that cancer to understand which mutations might exist within that cancer. We're also trying to understand, of those mutations within an individual's cancer, which ones do we think may mount an immune response? Once we understand which mutations in the DNA might mount an immune response, that's when we create a vaccine. And that vaccine is very specific to that one individual's cancer. This is using the mRNA approach, just like we have used for COVID vaccine. In fact, it's interesting because some of the regulators that I've talked to, the FDA, have asked us, well, is this treatment going to be safe? And I said, well, so far it's been safe for over 1 billion patients from our COVID vaccine. So we've treated 1 billion people. I think we can be fairly confident that it's going to be safe. We create this vaccine based on the sequencing information, and then we send it back to the patient and the patient's physician, and they administer the vaccine. And we have to be very careful because it's a very different paradigm than in the past when you could just send a hospital a bunch of drug and you could just take any drug off the shelf, make sure it matches the name. Each vial has the patient's number on it, so you have to make sure you match that vaccine with that patient. After we administer the vaccine to the patient, that's when we watch them to make sure that the cancer doesn't come back. And so far in our early clinical trials, we've reduced the risk of cancer recurrence by over 50%. So we're really excited about the efficacy. Thank you. So that's how we're tackling cancer from a very, very individualized approach. But I'd also like to talk moving forward into not only do we try and reduce that risk of cancer coming back, but it's important for the patient to live a full and healthy life. And that's where I want to move over to you, Kris, and talk a little bit about how you're forging that wellness journey to the people that you're helping to coach.
Thank you. Well, Kyle, while you're doing your work, which is so necessary, what I try to do is help patients meet their doctors and their bodies halfway. And that is by practicing self-care as healthcare. And so I came up with what I call the 5 pillars of wellness. These are really the basis of lifestyle medicine, which of course has been around a lot longer than me. And these 5 pillars are basically being mindful about what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're thinking, and how you're resting and renewing. And there's these simple practices that we do, and we keep them simple so that patients and people who don't want to be patients can actually follow through with them. Because, we live in a world where we're hacking everything, and it's the latest trend and it's the latest fad, and many of us aren't even really doing the basics. So we focus on the basics, and those pillars rest on a foundation of stress management, because we know that stress is, a very chronic contributor to chronic illness. And through the course of that, what I have seen is people start to feel like they're taking back their health, they're taking back their power, they're contributing to their well-being as opposed to contributing to their disease. And it was very inspiring for me because prior to cancer, we all as patients, we want to feel like some sense of control, that there's something that we can do in a very out of control world. So prior to cancer, I thought that the environment was only on the outside. And then when I got sick and I started to teach myself how to cook and feel better and started to read and educate myself, you realize that we have this internal environment as well. And the quality of our inner terrain contributes to the quality of our overall health. So basically, what I do is I'm a gardener. I teach people how to tend to their inner gardens.
Love that. And what really resonates with me is that sense of control. People really do want to feel like they have some control over their lives and their health. And giving people that sense of control is so important. Thank you for that work, Kris. So, Brad, let's talk a little bit now about First Descents and how you're giving people some control over their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So after my aunt's diagnosis, I did a bit of research. I felt really helpless. I didn't know, watching her go through this, she had great clinical care, but didn't have a lot of, at the time, emotional or social or psychosocial support. And so I did a bit of research, and right around 2000, I think there were about 250 pediatric oncology programs in the US, about 10,000 pediatric patients diagnosed each year, and that's fantastic. Like, everyone needs support. Conversely, though, there were about 70,000 young adults diagnosed in the US each year, and there were 0 support services outside of the clinical care at that time. And so I realized there was a need there. I saw it firsthand with my aunt, and I kind of did the only thing I knew how to do, and something that had really positively impacted my own life, and that was teaching people her age with cancer how to kayak. And to your point, Kyle and Kris, just having something that they could get their hands on, right? Something that they could then regain that control of. It was a very tangible thing. I think we actually have a movie. Should I play that now? There she is. Okay, yeah.
The primary mission of First Ascents is to provide free outdoor adventures for young adults 18 to 39 years old fighting and surviving cancer. In my own life, I found that every great experience is built upon three key things, and those things being the places that you're in, the people that you're with, and the challenges that you're facing.
My doctor told me about the program, and I looked it up, and I was like, yes, I'm all about it. It was not much of a decision, and I was very excited.
Outliving is taking risks and living life, and shit happens to everybody. You just gotta keep moving.
I always think it's not good to wait for adventure. You know, I got a great plan, I'm gonna do this trip, and then, you know, life gets in the way, and you don't do it. And then maybe you never get an opportunity. So to me, it's just go out there, have fun while you can, and enjoy life. Don't wait for it to come to you, or just make it happen.
That's awesome. And Brad, I'm not going to let this slip by. I saw the man salmon.
I probably should have prefaced that video a little bit. Everyone at First Ascents gets a nickname. It kind of started our very first program. We had 3 guys named Brad there. So to tell them apart, we got nicknames. And then what we realized is actually a really powerful part of that adventure experience, that sort of new beginning, reclaiming your life, outliving it is our tagline. And so with that comes a new name. And so it's over the past 24 years now, it's become a thing.
Okay, well, Kris and I are waiting for our names.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what they will be yet.
Careful what you wish for. I'm man salmon.
Catfish doctor or something. Good. So, incredible video. Great work that you're doing. One of the things that I think is really important in the work that we do is trying to really understand the impact that we're making on people's lives. And so what I'd like to do is talk to you both about how do you measure that impact, and how do you make sure that you're on the right path. And maybe, Kris, I'll start with you, and you could talk a little bit about the impact that you're having.
Yeah, absolutely. So I pulled some data from a few of our programs. A lot of what I do is I do a lot of public speaking, and I've written 7 books. But we do have 2 core programs, and one is a 21-day total wellness program where we focus on meal plans and recipes and shopping lists, and we have a dietitian, and it's a plant-based diet that we're helping people follow to just really reset their bodies, reset their guts, take out all of the processed foods and the refined sugar and that kind of stuff. And we have fitness plan that goes with that, as well as guided meditations to focus on stress reduction over the course of the 21 days. And so that's one of our core programs. And another program is an ongoing coaching and support community to help people continue and follow through. And again, we have dietitians, and we have a wellness team that helps our participants in those programs. So here's some of the data that we pulled. 62% of the people who have gone through our program and our community experience better sleep and more energy. 79% were better able to manage their stress. 63% felt more loved and supported on their healing path. 85% practiced more consistent self-care. And 91% felt more empowered and positive about their future. And I think what that speaks to is each and every one of us, again, you don't have to be a patient to do these things. We can actually make a difference in the quality of our lives. And but also about the power of community, because we need each other. There's a great quote by Swami Satchitananda, and he says, "I illness, we wellness." We're more likely to follow through with the commitments that we make to ourselves when we have a community to lean on.
Love that. And these numbers are incredible. So I have not been diagnosed with cancer, but I'm going to go through your program because I think I could use 85% more consistent self-care and better sleep and more energy. The other thing I'll mention that you don't have on the slide is there are a ton of randomized data on the importance of exercise and cancer outcomes, and the importance of stopping smoking and cancer outcomes, and the importance of meditation on cancer outcomes. And so when I was taking care of patients, it was something that we would talk about all the time. What are you doing outside of the traditional therapies that we're giving you? Because everyone can feel better from these type of benefits. Great, so let's move on to you, Brad. I know you've done some work as well in measuring the impact that you've had with First Descents.
Yeah, so, back in 2001, that was our first program, and it took about 2 years to get from idea to actual execution of that first program. And I just remember I was so focused for those 2 years to pull it off with, an amazing group of volunteers and board members, that the day came and I drove my car up to the program site, and I just pulled over and I was like, wait, is this actually going to work? Like, I had never stopped to ask myself that question. I was just so focused on getting it off the ground. And that was back in 2001. We hosted a week-long kayak experience for 15 young adults from around the country. And by the end of that week, it was like visible, right? Like, I mean, of course, anecdotally, the feedback was powerful, but you just saw the transformation. And that kind of lit this fire that has burned brighter and brighter ever since. And since then, I think we've hosted about 11,000 young adults with cancer over a myriad of adventures all over the country and around the globe. And about a decade in, we were still seen, I think, as a bit, it was like a vacation almost. And we didn't see ourselves that way. And so we worked initially with Stanford to do one research study, and then the University of Michigan to do a second. And the findings across both studies were pretty consistent, which was pretty affirming for us. Looking at it, young adults with cancer, what we're seeing is that they often come to our program and they express feelings of isolation from their peer group, alienation from their peer group. The isolation piece is crazy to me because I think now about 80,000 young adults are diagnosed in the U.S. each year. And oftentimes when our participants show up at our program, they say it's the first time they've met someone else their age that they can relate to that's going through the same thing. And so much of what we do is just create community around this, right? Like get together in a meaningful way in a beautiful place and allow that dialogue to happen between our participants. We also see these participants, a lot of them, and we can relate to this. Our bodies are a big part of our identity at that age. There are a lot of challenges with body image, self-confidence, self-esteem. Feelings of depression and anxiety are pretty consistent in our population. And so our studies found that participants who came to us with like clinical depression saw over a 50% reduction by the end of the week, and that was sustained after the program, which I think is really powerful. As one doctor put it, and this may be controversial, he helped administer the study. He said, well, I can either prescribe antidepressants or I can prescribe First Descents. And it doesn't take away from the need for clinical care and medications at all, but it is an opportunity to look at other supportive, supplemental, and complementary care options out there that do exist, similar to what Kris is doing, First Descents is doing. We saw the same thing with feelings of anxiety, increased sense of body image, self-confidence, self-esteem. People noted a sense of renewed trust in their body. A lot of our participants have expressed feelings of betrayal by their body, which, at an age when, again, you're so physically active, to have your body betray you like that, this is a way to sort of reconnect with it and to work together to achieve a goal. And 100% report increased ability to cope with cancer and its effects. So it just really affirmed what we're doing to see these numbers, to get this data, to say, okay, this is moving the needle, this is working.
Thank you, Brad. It's really incredible for me to hear you say that people feel so isolated given all the social media and all the connections that they can have online. But I think there's something different with connecting in real life and having dedicated time where you can just sit with individuals and experience something together like what you're developing. Can you talk a little bit about that isolation component?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think the isolations, it's twofold. One, it's sometimes we've heard it's often a choice. Like people just don't know how to interact now. They're depressed. They're insecure. They're unsure. And then I think their friend group also doesn't really know how to interact with them anymore, right? Like that's no longer normal. It's not it's not like they're ill-intentioned. They just, if you haven't had cancer and you have had cancer, it's like a lot of us didn't know how to talk to the person in the friend group who got cancer. And so I think some of the power of the program that we administer is to ask these participants to travel oftentimes across the country, to leave behind everything they know, to go into a setting with a bunch of people they've never met, take on a challenge they probably never thought they would do. Not a lot of people have whitewater kayaked, right? But we also do rock climbing, ice climbing, all sorts of stuff now. But still, that's a lot to ask of someone. And so I think just by putting yourself into that position, you're allowing a space to start that connection, right? Like all the noise is behind you. You're not sitting in a sterile room under fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs in a circle talking. Like you're out there kayaking or climbing or whatever in nature with this new group of people, and that catalyzes this connection that really breaks down those feelings of isolation. Like those just dissolve very quickly.
And those people are people who also understand. They get it. They've been diagnosed, and so it's easier for perhaps them to open up to others.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to sit around and just be sort of on the periphery of some of these conversations, because you just see how cathartic it is just to be able, it's almost like all of this was bottled up inside and they didn't know how to get it out, and all of a sudden they have this conversation, and it like ticks off this amazing flood of connection and information and love for each other, and it builds this community that's probably more like family, and that just really, again, that isolation piece, I think so much of this is like because of the isolation, depression, anxiety, et cetera, and so being able to get rid of that is tremendous.
And do you think part of the reason why you've been so successful is because you're pushing people to their extremes? And when you push people to their extremes, they're more vulnerable and they're more willing to open up?
Yeah, I think that's a really astute point. That everyone, like the river doesn't care if you've had cancer or not, right? It doesn't care who you are. It treats everyone equally. And I think that everyone sort of has to be vulnerable when they're doing, climbing a multi-pitch ascent on a vertical rock wall or kayaking down a rapid for the first time. It's sort of this great equalizer. Nature has that ability, and so everybody becomes really vulnerable, and I think that vulnerability breaks down those defenses that we have, those walls that we put up, and it catalyzes the connection, and I think forms a bond that's much stronger than it otherwise would be.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about that vulnerability piece. Kris, can you share with us, perhaps, what that might mean when you're coaching someone through a wellness journey, why it's important for them to open up and perhaps be vulnerable? Or is that just part of their regular process of being diagnosed?
I think so many of us have a hard time asking for help. And even if we just think back or think of it from an evolutionary perspective, we thrive when we're in a pack. We are pack animals. And so what are the things that we try to avoid? We try to avoid not being in the pack. So we want to fit in. We don't want to necessarily be different. We certainly don't want to be ill. And so this is a hardwired fight or flight thing that's in each and every single one of us. And then there's that moment happens, and it's, in some way, it's going to happen to all of us. We all go through life. We have what I call a rupture. It's when the rug gets pulled out from under you. It's when you get kicked in the teeth. It's, when everything changes and you don't know what life is going to look like anymore. And so there's that incredible vulnerability just in that. But what I have found is that vulnerability is truly our strength. There's a strength in our softness, in our willingness to say, this is what's going on for me and I'm scared, and somebody else to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here to listen and I love you. And when we realize that and we see this in the headlines all the time now, that we're living through an epidemic of loneliness, of isolation, of feeling other, only made more, obvious with the pandemic. Well, if we want to break down loneliness, we want to break through isolation, then the first thing that we do is we reach out to each other, but not with our masks, not with being completely ready for battle, not with all of our barriers, but with this is the real me, and I'd like to know the real you. And that's how we make that big change from feeling very isolated and to feeling connected.
Thank you. It resonates that preparing for battle and that vulnerability. I had a patient that I took care of who was going through treatments, doing pretty well, but at one point said to me that he was feeling vulnerable and he didn't know what to do next. And we talked a little bit about his treatment plan, and what he said to me was that everyone talks about cancer as a battle and cancer being a fight, but he didn't feel like he had the right tools. He said, this is an unfair fight. I don't have the treatments and I don't have the ability to fight cancer in a way where I can win. And I think that really resonated with me when I talk about cancer. I no longer talk about it as being a fight or a war against cancer. And I realized he's right. We don't have the right tools to fight against cancer. There are some people that we have enough tools to cure cancer, but unfortunately, in the vast majority of people, certainly with metastatic disease, we just don't have the right tools. And so that's why I decided to do something about it and try and find better tools to fight cancer. That was a personal story for me about why I decided to go into a cancer research field. But I think all of us have been affected by personal stories, and maybe, if you don't mind, the two of you could share a personal story that's had a big impact on you. Kris?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump on what you were saying, though, because I think it's so important, and that idea that cancer is a battle, and that this is cancer dialogue and cancer metaphors and cancer language that's been used for a long time. And I think for a lot of patients, it's harmful language. So what I like to see and talk about and encourage other patients, if they're interested, is to approach it in a different way, which is I have tumors in both of my lungs and my liver. To get curious about those tumors, to get curious about my lungs and my liver and say, well, what is it that these organs like? What do they not like? How can I learn how to tend to them? Because they're struggling. There's a part of me that's struggling. And so to come to that part with a sense of compassion and curiosity and care is just a game changer. Because we may not be cured, but we can always be on a healing path. And so I think what's so powerful, we've had a couple of moments to talk backstage and before the event, is just when I said to Kyle, so basically you're creating something that wakes up my own immune system and says, hey, buddy, guess what? There's some cancer in here. You might want to check that out. And then my immune system is like, oh, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for the heads up. Thanks. And then, I'm working, my body is basically working the way it's supposed to be working to detect cancer, right?
That's such a great way to put it. It's exactly what we're doing. We're actually not administering any therapy. What we're doing is we're training. We're educating your T cells. We need your T cells to wake up and say, hey, there's something going on here that you should figure out. This isn't right. So you've caught that exactly, and I know it's something that you've been thinking about for a long time, how to awaken your immune system to help in the healing process.
Yeah, thank you. So lots of stories along the way, 21 years of meeting incredible patients, but I'll say one that made a very powerful impact on me. So this maybe about 10 years ago, I was giving a lecture at a hospital, and I got there early, and the people were asking me if I wanted to take a tour of the facility, and I'm like, oh, I've kind of been to a lot of hospitals, but okay. I'd love to see your new CAT scan bed. Show it to me. It's glamorous. Thank you. But so we walked by this little gallery where there's this exhibit by patients and their family members, and I saw this incredible drawing, and I'd love to see the slide. Yeah. So this is a drawing by a 7-year-old, and it's for her mom, and it's her hope and her prayer, her desire for her mother to be cancer-free. And it's a desire that every single cancer patient has. But what struck me was how the word cancer is spelled. It is spelled wrong. And I was probably, again, 10 years into my journey of living with stage 4 cancer and accepting that and managing the fear and anxiety and, you know, the path that I'd been on. And when I saw this picture, it literally took the wind out of me, because it took the power out of cancer for me. And I said, oh my gosh, it's just a word. What if I spell it wrong? Will that help me deal with it more? And it did. It's just like the things that we do that basically trick ourselves or trick our minds to be like, wait a minute, you got this. This is a word. You are still the same person with the same dreams, the same potential. And cancer is still a highly stigmatized thing. And so I was so grateful to this little 7-year-old. She really changed my life, and she ended up giving me this photo or this piece of art, and it's one of my most cherished possessions.
I love that. You have that at home?
I do.
That's awesome.
It's good artwork.
It is. It's beautiful. Brad, your story?
Yeah, I just also want to echo what Kris was talking about. We were backstage before this, and I mean, it's still like the gravity of what Kyle is presenting on here is still kind of hitting. It's surreal. You guys it's the most optimistic I've been since this all began back in 2001. So I just want to say thank you guys. It's just groundbreaking stuff, and I'm so pumped about it. As far as stories go, it's tough. You know, like I said, we've worked with 11,000 young adults with cancer over the years, and each one of their stories is probably worthy of a movie, right? Like a Hollywood film. It's so inspiring. We're constantly humbled by everything that they teach us through taking on these adventures. I guess if I chose one, there was a young man. This was probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago now, and he came out to one of our kayaking programs in Montana. I had the great pleasure of being on the river with him. And when he showed up, he was very closed off. Like, clearly, he was I think he was about 19 at the time, and just, he was upset. He had an incurable cancer, and you could just see the light had left his eyes a little bit. But he was a natural kayaker, and so I thought, this is an opportunity to work together to do something that you're going to enjoy. And so over the course of that week, you just saw like the color come back to his face, the sparkle back in his eye. He was smiling and laughing a lot more. And he and I formed just a really meaningful connection as friends through that experience of learning to kayak. And he went home. Over the years, we stayed in touch. He actually pursued kayaking, which like warmed my heart. We don't expect that of any participant, but when they do, I'm just so excited. He became quite a good kayaker. He actually became one of our lead staff. So he actually started teaching our programs, teaching other participants how to kayak, how to rock climb, leading that experience for them. I got to know his family throughout this process. And his mom just told me that, you know, before that experience, he was kind of locked in his room and he wouldn't come out. And they finally coaxed him to go to this program. And that was a turning point. As I said, he went on to become a lead staff. He actually founded his own nonprofit, which has raised well over $1 million now to benefit the causes that were benefiting him while he was going through this. I think that's quite a legacy to leave. And I remember he called me, he said, hey, I've got 6 weeks to live. And I just said, where are you? I'm going to come to you. And he said, no, don't. Just remember me the last time we were on the river. And anyway, I think it's a testament to, his doctors kept him alive long enough to experience this program, long enough to start a nonprofit that lives on well beyond him and benefits other people. And so it's just cool to see it all come together. And I still think about him every day.
Thank you for sharing that story, Brad. Yes. It's incredible impact that these people's lives can have on us. Just another really quick story. I worked very long for many years on a treatment for people with brain cancer. And glioblastoma is unfortunately very, very difficult to treat. And we had an event where we invited some of the participants in our clinical trials to come and talk to us about what it meant to have a therapy that they could try to help people with brain tumors. And after the event was over, one of the participants asked to meet me, and I obviously said, yes, of course, I'd love to meet. And she came up to me with her husband and her children, and she said, I only have one word to say to you. I said, oh, okay. I was hoping it would be something nice. Actually, it was one thing that she wanted to say to me, and she just said, thank you. And it was just a thank you, but it was really impactful for me to be recognized, to see the impact of the work that we do on someone's life is, again, an honor and a privilege, for sure. Okay, let's move on to next topic. We have only about 15 minutes left here, and what I'd like to move on to is about what's next. What's next for us? What's next for our organizations? How are we going to continue to have that impact on people's lives? And I'll share with you our vision for our INT, individualized neoantigen therapy. So many of you might not know this, but there are many companies right now that are developing a screening test where you can draw someone's blood and you can look to see whether or not there's tiny little fragments of DNA in someone's blood that might have come from a cancer. And so you could go to your doctor even today and ask for one of these tests. They could draw a blood sample, and that blood sample may say that somewhere in your body there could be cancer cells. Now, a lot of people aren't doing this because I'm not sure it would help me if I found out that I had cancer, but I didn't know where in my body it was, and I couldn't find it on any type of scans. But what we hope to do with our vaccine is to take those pieces of DNA and create our vaccine based on those pieces of DNA. And what that means is you could go to your doctor, she could draw the blood to see whether or not you have cancer DNA. We could create that vaccine based on that blood sample. We could administer the vaccine. She could then follow up with another blood sample and hope that DNA went away. That is the future of how we're going to cure cancer. I believe that if we get to these tumors early enough, in a place where all we see is maybe a couple of cells that are producing that cancer DNA, and we can get to our immune systems to find it early, we should be able to control and manage cancer in the future. So that's our vision at Moderna for our path to get to a cancer cure. So that's our future. Let me talk to you both about what you see in the future. And Kris, let me start with you.
Thank you. So I'm always looking at what are the barriers that keep us from living fully. And I'd say the first part of the work that I was doing was focused on the practical, the tactical, what we can control. And that's really like what we're eating, how we're taking care of ourselves. And then about 5 years ago, when I was going through another rupture in my own life, my dad was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. There was a lot of things that were changing in my own business. My publisher said, it's time for you to write another book. So, as publishers will do. And, you like to tackle tough topics like cancer and vegetables. How about something a little bit more mass market next time? And I was like, okay, what am I going to write? And I decided I was going to write a book about grief and the big, messy emotions that happen when life falls apart. And so I like to think about this chapter of my work and its focus on addressing what's eating us. Again, those barriers that keep us to fully alive living. And I know that in my own community, that has been something that's been a real struggle of going through so much uncertainty, not only with a diagnosis, but with the state of the world right now. And so what I have learned as a result of this process is, those big, messy emotions that so many of us want to avoid, they do impact our health in such a big way. And when we learn to tend to them, they may not go away, right? We're not trying to cure these parts of ourselves because we can't amputate any of our emotions and expect to be whole, and wholeness is the point. But the more we're supporting them, the more we're acknowledging them, the more we're tending to them, the better quality of life we have, the better connections we have, the more joy we have. And so right now, that is the conversation that I'm focused on having.
Sounds great. And Brad, how is your organization evolving?
Yeah, so like I said, we've been around about 25 years. We're entering our 25th year anniversary, and over the past 25 years, we've learned a lot about what works and certainly what doesn't work, and we've consistently refined our program experience to be as effective as possible. One thing we've come to learn is that, and trust me, we've looked everywhere, but because there's really no program like First Ascent's in existence right now, there's really no facility or site that perfectly fits our program needs and our participants' needs. And so, we for so long it was just a struggle to year over year to stay alive and keep the organization afloat. And now we're kind of at this point where instead of looking month to month, we're looking out 50, 100 years, and we realize that we need to start creating home for ourselves. I like to say we've been couch surfing for a long time, which is totally cool. I did it as an athlete my whole career, but now I'm in my 40s. I don't want to sleep on people's couches. Like we need our own home, and so we are in the process of heading down that path and creating custom-built facilities specific to our participants' needs to treat each individual that comes to these programs as well as we possibly can. What we do isn't really scalable, and we don't want it to be scalable. We want it to be individual, and that's our goal is that each person that dedicates a week of their time to us in these adventures, that they leave with the best possible transformation that they can get. And so we think that that's probably the next step and will push us out for the next 100 years.
Really exciting. I want to learn more about it. So I think you told me it was in Montana. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I have anything to do with it, it's in Montana. I live in Montana. But we've had a lot of success delivering programming on the Clark Fork River outside of Missoula, Montana. And we've identified our first property there, and we're going to start a build process soon. So it's scary, but that's, we ask our participants to take an adventure with us, and this is an adventure, a challenge for ourselves. So,
wonderful. And I'll speak on behalf of the people here as well as myself. Kris, I'd love to learn more about your work and some of the things that you've learned and teach others. I think you have a book that has recently been published. Maybe we could share. Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, going back to my publisher saying, you want to write about grief? Really? I said, yeah, I guess I really do like to write about the tough stuff, because it's the tough stuff. It's the barriers that keep us, again, from what I was saying, fully alive living. So I'm not a morning person, braving loss, grief, and the big messy emotions that happen when life falls apart. And it's going to happen for every single one of us in some way. I like to say we can't expect or want the rainbow, but say, hold the rain. And it's been a great privilege to write this book, actually. A lot of the stories in the book are stories that I learned as a result of experiencing my own diagnosis, but also walking my dad through his. And I got to be with him when he passed and got to learn so much from him as a result of this journey and moving from being a patient to being a caregiver. And so, that's my latest book.
So this is about your personal journey and managing grief, but it's also about how others have managed grief?
Absolutely. And each chapter is broken up into the different experiences and emotions that will happen when, again, life kicks you in the teeth. So things like rage and anxiety and fear and depression, and how we can start to become our own advocates, and how we can practice a little bit of self-care even in the most difficult times. Having difficult conversations with loved ones who may be on the verge of passing. Navigating what to say and what not to say. You were talking about that, Brad. I have a chapter called Awkward Times, Awkward People, right? Because again, we live in a grief-phobic, messy, emotions-averse society, and few of us have the tools to deal with loss. And so we may not know what to say to somebody else.
Great, thank you for that. I will be getting my copy right after this because it's so important. Like you said, we all will be faced with challenging times and have grief in our lives. And I think we're not equipped to know how to process that and work through it. So thank you for the help and the guidance. Okay, Brad, how can we help First Descents? I would love to help.
I mean, the work you're doing is outstanding. Kris, you've been just a tremendous inspiration I'm like still starstruck that I'm sitting next to Kris Carr. This is amazing. But just truly an inspiration. We were at dinner last night and one of our alumni was there, and the first book she was handed was your book after her diagnosis. And we hear that time and again. So just want to applaud you for the work you've done and continue to do. And like Kyle, I will absolutely be reading that book, and I love the title. I think it's just so witty. First Descents, like I said, these programs are free of charge. We fundraise for them. We pay for them. We don't think that cancer is really expensive for a lot of our participants. A lot of our participants are in debt because they're young adults, and that's what we do. And so we didn't want to create a barrier to entry. So we're always fundraising. We're obviously about to build a facility, so we're fundraising for that. Our director of fundraising is over here, so he's probably screaming at me to make sure I make that point. If you're feeling generous. Beyond that, I think
they need the money for facilities.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. I also want to point out that it's really easy for me to sit up here and take credit for this organization. All I did was have an idea. Our incredible team, our staff, our volunteers, our board members, and our participants are what make First Descents possible. So I want to just say thank you to them. And one last thought. I always like to end on this quote. One of our participants said that always stuck with me and frankly all of us. She said that the doctors, the nurses, and the treatments I received without a question saved my life. And First Descents taught me how to live that life. And I think it just speaks to kind of what we're talking about up here. The work Kris has done, the work your team's doing, the work we're trying to do. If we can all work together to heal each individual patient as wholly as possible and meet them where they are and meet their needs for success, I think then we've done our jobs well, right? And if anyone knows someone with cancer, recently diagnosed or otherwise, there are resources out there. Please refer them. Please encourage them to take control of their lives, their health, to reach out, to get involved. There's a whole net there waiting to catch them. So,
and let me just expand on that a little bit. So we can go to First Descents website if we have identified someone who might be able to help.
Absolutely, yeah. So 18 to 39-year-olds, please check out the website. You can apply for programs there. Like I said, it's free of charge. We have an amazing team waiting to accept your application, guide you through it. And if it's not a fit, if for whatever reason you can't attend a program or if you don't meet the age requirements, still reach out. We can help be that connector to other amazing resources clearly we know about Kris and the incredible work she's doing, and we're happy to at least point them in some good direction.
And do you go out to cancer centers and let them know about the program so that they're aware of First Ascent?
Yeah, we started a Prescribe Adventure campaign a few years ago, and
I love that.
it's been a lot of fun.
I'm ready to prescribe Adventure right now.
We're counting on you, man. And we've just worked with a lot of clinicians and social workers and healthcare workers to just educate them about this resource. One of the points of feedback we got early on was like, hey, I wish I'd known that First Ascent was available, because they get a lot of patients saying, I need more support, I need more help, and we didn't know where to refer them. And so we recognize that opportunity, and I think we have like over 400 healthcare partners around the country now that we work with and keep informed, and they refer patients our way, which has been just tremendous.
Love that. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. I would just like to end with a couple of closing remarks from both of you. Kris, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to give us?
Yes, I'm going to pass on some fatherly wisdom that my dad passed on to me before he died. And he said, make your golden years now. Oftentimes we wait, we put it off until the project's over, until the kids are out of the house, until we've wrapped whatever it is we want to wrap. And our golden moments are what we need to be focused on, because nothing is promised to us. It's not about getting those ducks in a row, because here's the thing about ducks. They don't want to be in a row. They want to fly. And so I'll leave you with that. Whatever your golden years look like, whatever your golden moments are, whatever truly living looks like to you, do it now.
Life is a gift, for sure. Brad, any closing comments?
I think Kris said it perfectly. One of the greatest gifts I've been given in having the honor to work with the participants over the past couple decades is just the perspective that they've given me. And I think, we're up here, we're talking specifically about cancer, but Kris's programs, First Ascents, like that data we showed, that's not specific to cancer necessarily. Like, an adventure can improve your life. Her programs can improve your life. So I just encourage everybody to live with that intention, to make some of those hard choices, to enroll in something like that, or to go seek an adventure, because it will benefit your life. And so I think living with a bit of intention and also a sense of urgency is one thing that I've learned and carried with me since I started this organization.
Thank you, Brad. And I just want to end by recognizing both of you for the incredible impact that you have on human lives. It's really inspiring, and you're doing God's work. Thank you. Okay, let's give a round of applause to our guests. And my apologies, we don't have time for questions, but if anyone has questions, please feel free to come and find us after the event. Thank you.